The stagecoach rattled to a halt in front of the dusty general store in Lead, South Dakota, and Zelda Norwood stepped down onto ground that felt as foreign and unforgiving as the future stretching before her, carrying with her a carpet bag, and a heart shattered into so many pieces she wondered if anyone would ever be able to fit them back together again. She stood there for a moment, the September sun of 1878 beating down on her bonnet, watching the dust settle around her boots while passengers brushed past and continued about their business. The town was smaller than she had imagined, rougher too, with wooden buildings lining a main street that looked like it had seen its share of gold rush fever and disappointment. Men in dusty work clothes walked with purpose toward the mines that dotted the hills surrounding the town, while women in practical dresses hurried between shops with baskets on their arms. Zelda clutched the letter in her pocket, the one from Carter Preston, the rancher who had placed an advertisement for a wife in the Boston newspaper. She had answered it in desperation, fleeing from memories that haunted her every waking moment. 3 months ago, she had been engaged to Thomas Whitfield, a banker's son with a charming smile and empty promises. She had discovered him in their apartment with her supposed best friend 2 weeks before their wedding, both of them tangled in sheets that Zelda herself had embroidered with hopes and dreams. The betrayal had cut deeper than any knife could, leaving her hollow and questioning everything she thought she knew about love. When her mother suggested she leave Boston and start fresh somewhere far away, Zelda had seen the mail-order bride advertisement and made a decision that terrified and freed her in equal measure. Now she was here, hundreds of miles from everything familiar, about to meet a stranger who would become her husband. "You must be Miss Norwood." The voice came from behind her, deep and careful with a gentleness that seemed at odds with its strength. Zelda turned and found herself looking into the kindest eyes she had ever seen. The man standing before her was tall, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work and an honest life. His face was weathered by sun and wind, lines creasing the corners of his eyes, and his brown hair curled slightly beneath his hat. He wore simple ranch clothes, clean but well worn, and held his hat respectfully in his hands. "Mr. Preston?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, madam, Carter Preston. I hope your journey was not too difficult." He spoke carefully, as if sensing her nervousness, his hazel eyes studying her face with concern rather than judgment. "It was long," Zelda admitted, surprised by the lack of presumption in his manner. She had expected someone rougher, perhaps demanding or impatient. Instead, Carter Preston stood at a respectful distance, making no move to touch her or claim her as his possession. "I imagine you are tired and would like to rest," Carter said. "I have arranged for you to stay at the boarding house tonight. Mrs. Campbell runs a respectable establishment, and she has prepared a room for you. I thought you might want some time before we discuss the arrangement." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes at this unexpected kindness. "That is very thoughtful of you, Mr. Preston. I know this is a difficult situation," he said quietly, meeting her gaze directly. "Coming all this way to marry a stranger, I want you to know there is no pressure. You can take your time deciding if this is truly what you want." Something in Zelda's chest, a piece that had been frozen since that terrible day in Boston, cracked just slightly. "You would let me leave if I wished?" "Yes, madam. I would pay for your return ticket without question." Carter's voice was steady and sincere. "I am looking for a wife, that much is true. But I want someone who chooses to be here, not someone trapped by circumstance." Zelda studied his face, searching for deception or hidden motives, but found only honesty. "That is not what I expected." "I know what some men are like," Carter said, his jaw tightening slightly. I have seen how they treat mail-order brides like property they have purchased. That is not what I want. I am hoping for a partnership, a real marriage built on respect and maybe in time, affection. The word love was notably absent, but Zelda found herself grateful for his honesty. Love had betrayed her once, left her broken and doubting. Perhaps respect was a better foundation anyway. I would like to see the boarding house, she said finally. And perhaps tomorrow we could talk more about your expectations. Relief crossed Carter's features. Of course. Let me help with your bag. He reached for her carpet bag, and Zelda allowed him to take it, following as he led her down the main street toward a two-story building with a painted sign reading Campbell's Boarding House. The walk was short, and Carter maintained a proper distance, nodding to townspeople as they passed but not stopping to introduce her. Zelda appreciated this discretion, not yet ready to be displayed as the mail-order bride who had come to marry the rancher, Mrs. Campbell turned out to be a plump woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense manner that reminded Zelda of her grandmother. She looked Zelda over with the practiced eye of someone who had seen many young women arrive and lead with dreams and desperation in equal measure. "Room 4, top of the stairs," Mrs. Campbell said, handing Zelda a key. "Supper is at 6. No men allowed upstairs, Mr. Preston included." "Yes, madam," Zelda said, grateful for the protection even though she sensed she did not need it with Carter. "I will call for you tomorrow at 10 if that suits you," Carter said, still holding his hat in his hands. "We could take a ride out to the ranch so you can see where you would be living, only if you are feeling up to it." 10 o'clock would be fine, Zelda agreed. Carter nodded, placed his hat back on his head, and left without any attempt to claim a kiss or even touch her hand. Zelda watched him go, confused by the mixture of relief and something else she could not quite name. The room was simple but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a faded quilt, a washstand with a chipped pitcher and bowl, and a window that looked out over the street. Zelda set her carpetbag on the bed and sank down beside it, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion that went deeper than the physical. She had done it. She had traveled halfway across the country to escape her past, and now she was here in this rough mining town, preparing to marry a stranger. The reality of it crashed over her, and for the first time since leaving Boston, Zelda allowed herself to cry, pressing her face into the quilt to muffle the sound. She cried for the girl she had been, so naive and trusting. She cried for the future she had imagined that would never come to pass. And she cried for the heart she had carried across all those miles, still bleeding and raw despite her best efforts to protect it. When the tears finally stopped, Zelda washed her face in the basin and began unpacking her few belongings. She had not brought much, just some practical dresses, her mother's silver hairbrush, and a small book of poetry that had been a gift from her father before he died. Everything else she had left behind, wanting no reminders of her old life. As she arranged her things in the small dresser, Zelda thought about Carter Preston. He was not what she expected, not at all. The advertisement had been brief, listing his age as 28, his profession as rancher, and his desire for a wife to help run his household. She had imagined someone harsh and demanding, someone who wanted a servant more than a partner. But the man she had met seemed different. There was a gentleness in his manner, a consideration in the way he spoke and acted. He had given her space when she needed it most, asked nothing of her except that she consider his offer fairly. Zelda wanted to feel nothing, to keep her heart locked away where it could not be hurt again. But despite her best intentions, she felt a small spark of curiosity about this cowboy with the kind eyes. Supper at the boarding house was a communal affair, with 6 other residents gathering around a long table in the dining room. Mrs. Campbell served beef stew and fresh bread, and the conversation flowed easily around Zelda, though several people cast curious glances her way. She kept her eyes on her plate and spoke only when directly addressed, not yet ready to explain herself to strangers. After supper, she returned to her room and sat by the window, watching the sun set over the Black Hills. The landscape was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, so different from the manicured parks and tree-lined streets of Boston. Here, everything felt raw and real, stripped down to its essential nature. Perhaps that was what she needed. A place where pretense was impossible, where people showed their true selves because survival demanded honesty. Zelda slept poorly, her dreams filled with fragments of her old life mixed with images of this new one. When she woke, the sun was already streaming through the window, and she could hear the sounds of lead coming to life outside, voices calling, wagons rattling, the distant sound of mining equipment echoing from the hills. She dressed carefully in a practical brown dress that would be suitable for a ranch visit, pinning her dark blonde hair up in a simple style. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a woman of 22 who looked older than her years, with shadows under her green eyes and a wariness in her expression that had not been there 6 months ago. At precisely 10 o'clock, there was a knock on the front door of the boarding house, and Mrs. Campbell called up the stairs that Mr. Preston had arrived. Zelda descended to find Carter waiting in the front hall, hat in hand again, wearing clean ranch clothes and an expression of quiet hope that made something twist in her chest. "Good morning, Miss Norwood," he said. "Are you ready to see the ranch?" "Yes, I believe I am." He had brought a wagon rather than a horse, she noticed, probably thinking it would be more comfortable for her. The wagon was old but well-maintained, and the 2 horses pulling it looked healthy and strong. Carter helped her up to the seat, his touch careful and brief, before climbing up beside her. As they left lead behind, heading into the hills, Carter pointed out landmarks and shared information about the area. He spoke about the gold rush that had brought thousands to the Black Hills just a few years earlier, about the treaties with the Dakota that had been broken, about the town's growth and struggles. "The ranch is about 5 miles from town," he explained. "Far enough for peace and quiet, close enough that we can get supplies when needed. It is not a large operation, just me and 1 hired hand, but it provides a good living." "What do you raise?" Zelda asked, genuinely curious. "Cattle mostly, some horses." "I have been building the herd for 6 years now, since I first bought the land. It has been slow going, but steady." Carter's voice held pride mixed with humility. "The house is simple, but it is solid. Built it myself with help from some men in town." They crested a hill, and suddenly the ranch spread out before them. The house was indeed simple, a single-story structure made of logs and stone with a wide porch across the front. But it had a sturdy, welcoming look, nestled in a valley with a stream running nearby and corrals extending out behind it. Cattle grazed in the distance, and Zelda could see a barn and several outbuildings. "It is beautiful," she said, surprised by how much she meant it. There was something peaceful about this place, something that called to the broken pieces of her heart. Carter's face lit up with a smile that transformed his serious features. "I am glad you think so. I know it is not fancy, nothing like what you are probably used to in Boston." "I did not have much in Boston," Zelda said quietly. "I worked as a seamstress, lived in a small apartment with 2 other girls. This is much more than I expected." Carter looked at her with new understanding in his eyes but did not press for more information. Instead, he drove the wagon down to the house and helped her down, then led her inside. The interior was neat and orderly, with a large main room that served as both kitchen and living area, a fireplace built of river stone, and simple but well-crafted furniture. There were 2 bedrooms, one larger than the other, and the whole place had the feel of a home rather than just a house. "I want you to know," Carter said, standing in the middle of the main room with his hands in his pockets, "that if you agree to marry me, you would have your own bedroom for as long as you wanted. I would not expect anything you were not ready to give." Zelda felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she appreciated his directness. "That is very considerate. I mean what I said yesterday about wanting a partnership," Carter continued, his eyes serious. "I have been alone for a long time, and I would like a wife, a companion, someone to build a life with. But I know trust has to be earned. I am willing to wait for it, however long that takes." There was something in his voice, an understanding that went beyond the words, and Zelda wondered what experiences had taught him such patience. "May I ask why you placed the advertisement?" she said. "You seem like someone who would have no trouble finding a wife locally." Carter was quiet for a moment, looking out the window toward his land. "I have been focused on building this ranch for years, did not make much time for courting. And the few women I did try to court were not interested in ranch life, wanted to move to a bigger city or had dreams that did not include mud and cattle." He turned back to face her. "I am not a fancy man, Miss Norwood. I am a cowboy and a rancher. This land is in my blood, and I cannot imagine living anywhere else. I need someone who can understand that, who can see the value in this kind of life." Zelda walked to the window and looked out at the valley. The September air was crisp, and she could see aspens starting to turn gold on the hillsides. It was so different from everything she had known, and yet something about it called to her. "The man I was engaged to in Boston," she said slowly, "was charming and handsome and said all the right things. He promised me a comfortable life, a beautiful home, respectability. I thought I had everything I wanted." She paused, gathering courage. "I found him in bed with my best friend 2 weeks before our wedding. Everything I thought was real turned out to be a lie." Carter made a sound of sympathy, but Zelda held up a hand. "I am telling you this because I want you to understand that I do not trust easily anymore. Maybe I will never be able to fully trust again. I came here because I needed to escape, to start over somewhere where no one knew my shame." "That was not your shame," Carter said firmly. "That was his failure, his dishonor. You did nothing wrong." The conviction in his voice made Zelda's eyes burn with unshed tears. "Not everyone sees it that way. Some people said I must have driven him to it, that I was too cold or not woman enough to keep his interest." "Then those people are fools," Carter said, his jaw tight with anger on her behalf. "A real man keeps his promises, stands by his commitments. What he did was cowardice, plain and simple." Zelda turned to face him fully. "I am broken, Mr. Preston. My heart is in pieces, and I do not know if it can be mended. If you marry me, you will be getting damaged goods." Carter closed the distance between them slowly, stopping just near enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. "We are all carrying something, Miss Norwood. I do not believe you are broken beyond repair. And if you are willing to take a chance on this life, on this ranch, on me, I promise I will do everything in my power to show you that not all men are liars and cheats." His words, spoken with such quiet intensity, cracked something open inside Zelda. Here was a man offering her respect, patience, and honesty. It was not the passionate romance she had once dreamed of, but perhaps that was better. Passion had led her astray before. "I would need time," she said carefully. "Time to adjust, to learn to trust again." "You can have all the time you need," Carter promised. "And I would want to contribute, to have useful work. I cannot simply sit idle. The ranch always needs help. You could assist with the garden, the chickens, mending, cooking, whatever you wanted. Or if you wanted to continue your seamstress work, I would support that too. Zelda took a deep breath. Then yes, Mr. Preston, I will marry you. Relief and something deeper flooded Carter's features. You have made me very happy, Miss Norwood. I will do my best to be a good husband to you. And I will try to be a good wife, Zelda said, though the words felt strange in her mouth, weighted with promises she was not sure she could keep. They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Lead, with Mrs. Campbell and the local preacher's wife as witnesses. Zelda wore a dove gray dress she had made herself, and Carter wore a black suit that looked slightly uncomfortable on his rancher's frame. The ceremony was brief, the vows traditional, and when the preacher said Carter could kiss his bride, he pressed a chaste kiss to her forehead instead of her lips, respecting the boundaries she had set. They returned to the ranch that afternoon, and Carter showed her which bedroom would be hers. He had put fresh flowers in a vase on the dresser and made sure there were clean linens on the bed. The thoughtfulness of it made Zelda's throat tight. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I want you to be comfortable here," Carter replied. "This is your home now, too." That first week passed in a blur of adjustment. Zelda learned the rhythms of ranch life, rising early to cook breakfast before Carter headed out to work the cattle. She took over the kitchen completely, finding solace in the familiar work of cooking and cleaning. She also began tending the small garden Carter had planted, but not had time to properly maintain, weeding and harvesting the last of the summer vegetables. Carter's hired hand, a weathered man in his 50s named Samuel, treated her with quiet respect and helped her learn about the ranch operations. He had worked for Carter for 3 years and spoke highly of his employer's fairness and work ethic. In the evenings, Carter and Zelda would sit together on the porch, talking quietly about the day's events. Carter proved to be an excellent listener, asking questions about her life in Boston, her family, her interests. He never pressed when she did not want to talk about painful subjects, but he was always ready to hear when she did. Slowly, carefully, Zelda began to unfold. She told him about her father, a clerk who had died when she was 15, leaving her and her mother to fend for themselves. She talked about her work as a seamstress, the long hours and low pay, the constant struggle to make ends meet. She even spoke, haltingly, about Thomas and the humiliation of discovering his betrayal. Carter listened to all of it with quiet attention, his face showing anger at the injustices she had suffered, but never pity. He shared his own story, too, about growing up on a farm in Missouri, losing both parents to influenza when he was 19, and heading west to start fresh with nothing but determination and a small inheritance. "I know what it is like to start over," he said one evening as they watched the sun set over the hills, "to feel like everything you knew has been stripped away and you have to rebuild from nothing." "How did you do it?" Zelda asked. "How did you find the strength?" "One day at a time," Carter said simply. "One decision, one action, one small victory. I told myself that I would build something good here, something that mattered. And slowly it started to take shape." Zelda thought about this, about the idea of building something good from the wreckage of the past. It seemed possible here, in this place far from her old life, with this man who asked nothing she was not ready to give. As autumn deepened, Zelda found herself settling into the rhythm of ranch life. She proved to be an excellent cook, and Carter praised her meals with genuine appreciation. She also began sewing again, mending Carter's work clothes and making curtains for the windows, small touches that made the house feel more like a home. But it was in the small moments that something began to shift inside her. The way Carter always thanked her for meals, his genuine interest in her opinions, his constant consideration for her comfort. He never raised his voice, never spoke harshly, never made demands. When she made mistakes, which she did often as she learned ranch life. He was patient and encouraging. One morning in late October, Zelda was in the kitchen making bread when she heard a commotion outside. She looked out the window to see Carter being thrown from a horse he was training, landing hard in the corral dust. Without thinking, she ran outside, her heart pounding with fear. Carter was already getting to his feet, but she could see blood on his forehead where he had hit the fence rail. "You are hurt," she said, reaching him just as he swayed slightly. "I am fine," Carter protested, but his voice was unsteady. "You are not fine. Come inside right now." Zelda surprised herself with the firmness in her tone, but she was not going to let him brush this off. She guided him into the house and made him sit at the kitchen table while she fetched water and clean cloths. The cut on his forehead was not deep, but it was bleeding freely, and there was already a bruise forming. As she cleaned the wound, standing between his knees to reach his forehead properly, Zelda became aware of how close they were. She could feel the heat of his body, smell the scent of leather and sage that always clung to him. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed the cloth to his cut. "Does it hurt badly?" she asked softly. "Not so much," Carter said, but she could see him wince when she touched a tender spot. "You should be more careful. What if you had broken your neck? Would you have minded?" The question was asked lightly, but there was something underneath it, a real desire to know her answer. Zelda met his eyes, surprised by the intensity she found there. "Yes," she said quietly. "Yes, I would have minded very much." Something passed between them in that moment, something unspoken but powerful. Zelda found herself noticing things she had tried not to see before. The way Carter's eyes crinkled when he smiled, the strength in his hands, the line of his jaw. The way he was looking at her now with a tenderness that made her heart race. She stepped back quickly, flustered. "You should rest for a while. No more horse training today." "Yes, madam," Carter said, a small smile playing at his lips despite his injury. That night, Zelda lay in her bed unable to sleep, her mind racing. She had felt something when she was tending to Carter, something that frightened her with its intensity. She had promised herself never to be vulnerable again, never to open her heart to the possibility of pain. But Carter was making that promise impossible to keep. Over the next weeks, Zelda became increasingly aware of her husband in ways she had tried to avoid. The way he moved with easy grace despite his size, the sound of his laugh when Samuel told a joke, the patient way he handled the animals, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to her. She also began to notice the way he looked at her sometimes, with a longing he tried to hide but could not quite manage. He never acted on it, never even hinted at wanting more than their platonic arrangement, but she could see it in his eyes during unguarded moments. The first snow came in early November, dusting the hills with white and bringing a bitter cold that made the fireplace essential. Carter chopped extra wood and made sure the house was tight against drafts, constantly checking that Zelda was warm enough. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Zelda found herself studying his profile as he read a week-old newspaper from Deadwood. He had been so patient with her, asking nothing, giving everything. For 3 months now, he had been nothing but kind and respectful, proving with every action that he was nothing like Thomas. "Carter," she said quietly, using his first name for perhaps the 10th time since their marriage. It still felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way that made her nervous. He looked up from the newspaper. "Yes. Why did you choose me? There must have been other women who answered your advertisement." Carter set the newspaper aside, giving her his full attention. "There were a few others," he admitted. "But your letter was different. You were honest about your situation, did not try to paint yourself as something you were not. You said you were looking for a fresh start and a chance to be useful. That spoke to me." You were not concerned that I was running from something. We are all running from something or towards something, Carter said, often both at the same time. I figured if you were brave enough to travel this far alone, to risk marriage to a stranger, you must be stronger than you thought you were. Zelda felt tears prick her eyes. I do not feel very strong. Strength is not about never being afraid or hurt, Carter said gently. It is about getting up each day and trying again despite those things. You do that every single day, Zelda. The way he said her name, with such warmth and respect, made something bloom in her chest. Without thinking, she rose from her chair and crossed to where he sat on the settee. She sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Carter went very still, hardly seeming to breathe. I want to thank you, Zelda said softly, for being patient with me, for giving me time to heal. You do not need to thank me for that, Carter said, his voice rough. It is the least I could do. Not all men would have been so considerate. Then not all men deserve the gift of your trust. Zelda turned to look at him, really look at him, taking in the honest lines of his face, the strength and gentleness that existed together in him. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. Carter's breath caught, his eyes searching her face. Zelda, I am still healing, she said quietly, still learning to trust again. But I want you to know that I am grateful for you, for this life we are building. You have been kinder to me than I ever had a right to expect. Carter lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving her face. I would wait forever if that is what you needed. I do not think I need forever, Zelda said, surprised by her own words. Just a little more time. They sat together by the fire until late that night, hands joined, talking about everything and nothing. When Zelda finally rose to go to bed, Carter stood as well, and she found herself stepping close, rising on her toes to press a kiss to his cheek. Good night, Carter. Good night, Zelda. She could feel his eyes on her as she walked to her bedroom, and when she closed the door behind her, she pressed her hand to her racing heart. Something had shifted tonight, some barrier beginning to crumble. The next morning, Zelda woke to find a light snow falling. She dressed quickly and went to the kitchen to start breakfast, only to find Carter already there, cooking eggs and bacon. I thought I would give you a morning to sleep in, he said, smiling at her surprised expression. You did not have to do that. I wanted to. He plated the food and brought it to the table. Besides, I thought maybe after breakfast, if you wanted, we could ride out to check the cattle together. I could use an extra pair of eyes, and it is beautiful with the snow. Zelda felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with excitement. I have never been much of a rider. I have a gentle mare that would be perfect for you, and I will stay right beside you the whole time. An hour later, Zelda found herself on the back of a placid brown mare named Daisy, following Carter through the snowy hills. He had been right about the beauty. Everything was transformed by the snow. The harsh landscape softened into something almost magical. Carter rode beside her on his gelding, pointing out features of the land, showing her where the cattle liked to graze, explaining his plans for expanding the herd. He spoke with such passion about the ranch that Zelda found herself caught up in his vision, seeing it through his eyes. They stopped by the creek to let the horses drink, and Carter helped Zelda dismount. She stumbled slightly and he caught her, his hands on her waist steadying her. For a moment they stood close, his eyes searching her face. Are you all right? He asked softly. Yes, Zelda breathed, but she made no move to step away. Carter's hands remained on her waist, gentle but firm. Zelda, I need you to know something. What? I am falling in love with you. The words came out quietly but with absolute conviction. I know that is not what we agreed to, and I do not expect you to feel the same way, but I cannot keep it to myself anymore. Every day, I fall a little more. The way you hum while you cook, the way you talk to the chickens like they understand you, the strength you show in everything you do. I see you, and I love what I see." Zelda's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Fear and something else, something bright and terrifying, warred inside her. "I do not know if I can love again," she whispered. "I am so afraid." "I know," Carter said, one hand coming up to cup her face with infinite gentleness. "And I am not asking you to love me back. I just needed you to know that you are loved, truly loved for exactly who you are. No conditions, no expectations." A tear slipped down Zelda's cheek and Carter brushed it away with his thumb. "Do not cry, darling." "I am not sad," Zelda said, surprised to realize it was true. "I think maybe I am a little bit happy, and that terrifies me." Carter smiled, that warm smile that transformed his face. "Happiness does not have to be scary, not here, not with me." Zelda leaned into his touch, letting herself feel the warmth of his hand against her cheek, the solid strength of him standing before her. "Can I tell you something? Anything? When you got hurt last month, when I saw you thrown from that horse, I was so frightened. I realized that I cared about you more than I wanted to admit, and every day since, that feeling has been growing even though I have been trying to ignore it." Hope blazed in Carter's eyes. "You care about me?" "Yes," Zelda said, the admission feeling like stepping off a cliff. "I do not know if it is love yet. I am not sure I would recognize love if it was standing right in front of me. But I care about you, Carter Preston. I care what happens to you, how you feel, whether you are happy. Is that enough for now?" "That is more than enough," Carter said, his voice rough with emotion. "That is everything." He pulled her into an embrace, and Zelda let herself lean against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. She felt safe here, safer than she had felt since before her world fell apart in Boston. When they rode back to the ranch, Carter helped her down from the mare, his hands lingering at her waist. Inside, they made lunch together, moving around each other in the small kitchen with an ease that felt natural and right. That night, when Zelda rose to go to bed, Carter stood and took her hand. "May I kiss you?" he asked quietly. "A real kiss, not just on the forehead." Zelda's pulse jumped, but she nodded. Carter stepped close, one hand cradling her face while the other rested lightly on her waist. He bent his head slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Zelda found herself rising to meet him. Their lips met softly, a gentle brush that sent warmth flooding through her body. It was nothing like kissing Thomas had been, all heat and urgency. This was tender, almost reverent, Carter kissing her like she was something precious and fragile. When they parted, Zelda was breathing hard, her eyes wide. "Was that all right?" Carter asked, his own breathing unsteady. "Yes," Zelda whispered. "That was more than all right." Carter smiled and pressed another quick kiss to her lips. "Sleep well, Zelda. You too, Carter." But Zelda did not sleep well. She lay awake for hours, her fingers pressed to her lips, replaying that kiss over and over. Something inside her was changing, the ice around her heart beginning to thaw. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The next weeks passed in a haze of growing affection. Carter continued to court his own wife, bringing her small gifts, a ribbon from town, a book he thought she might like, wildflowers that somehow bloomed even in the cold. He told her stories about his childhood, shared his dreams for the ranch's future, made her laugh with tales of his early attempts at cooking before she arrived. Zelda found herself opening up in return, sharing memories she had kept locked away, hopes she had thought were dead. She told Carter about her father's love of poetry, her mother's fierce determination to keep the family afloat after his death, her own dreams of having a home and family someday. "You can have that here," Carter said one evening as they sat close on the settee, her hand in his. A home, a family, everything you want. I am starting to believe that, Zelda admitted. December arrived with heavy snows that kept them close to the house. Carter brought in extra wood and made sure they had plenty of supplies, preparing for them to be snowed in. Samuel had gone to stay with family in town for the winter, leaving Carter and Zelda alone on the ranch. The isolation might have felt oppressive, but instead, it felt intimate. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other, playing cards, simply talking. Carter taught Zelda to play chess, and she proved to be a quick study, beating him more often than he expected. "You are a formidable opponent," he said after she checkmated him for the third game in a row. "You are just a gracious loser," Zelda teased, feeling lighter than she had in months. "That too," Carter agreed, his eyes warm as they rested on her face. Christmas approached, and Zelda found herself thinking about the holiday differently than she had in years. In Boston, Christmas had been stressful, a reminder of all they did not have, all the gifts they could not afford. But here, with Carter, it felt different. She spent her spare time secretly making him a new shirt, carefully embroidering his initials on the cuff in a design of wheat and cattle that represented the ranch. It was the most personal thing she had ever made, each stitch infused with her growing feelings. Carter must have been planning something too, because he disappeared into the barn for long stretches, working on some mysterious project he would not explain. On Christmas Eve, they attended a service in town, the small church packed with miners and ranchers and their families. Carter held Zelda's hand throughout, and she noticed several people smiling at them with approval. Afterward, Mrs. Campbell invited them for coffee and cookies, beaming at how well Zelda looked compared to when she first arrived. "Marriage agrees with you, dear," the older woman said. "You have color in your cheeks now, light in your eyes." Zelda glanced at Carter, who was talking with some ranchers across the room. "Yes," she said softly, "I think it does." That night back at the ranch, they exchanged gifts by the fireplace. Zelda gave Carter the shirt, nervous about his reaction. He unfolded it carefully, his face going soft when he saw the embroidery. "Zelda, this is beautiful. You made this." "Yes, do you like it?" "I love it," Carter said, his voice thick. "I will treasure it always." He set the shirt aside carefully and retrieved a large, wrapped package from behind his chair. "This is for you." Zelda unwrapped it to find a small writing desk, beautiful in its simplicity, made of polished wood with a hinged top and small drawers. Inside was fine paper, ink, and pens. "You made this?" she asked, running her hand over the smooth surface. "Yes. You mentioned once that you used to write letters to your mother, that you missed having a proper place to write. I thought you might like to start again." Tears spilled down Zelda's cheeks. "It is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me." Carter wiped away her tears with gentle fingers. "You deserve thoughtful gifts, Zelda. You deserve everything good." She launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck and burying her face against his shoulder. Carter held her close, one hand stroking her hair. "Thank you," Zelda whispered, "for everything. For patience, for kindness, for seeing me when I felt invisible." "You could never be invisible," Carter said against her hair. "You are the brightest thing in my life." Zelda pulled back to look at him, this man who had taken her broken heart and handled it with such gentle care. "Kiss me, Carter." He did, deeply this time, his arms tightening around her as she pressed close. The kiss was full of longing held in check, desire tempered with tenderness. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. "Zelda," Carter said, his voice rough, "I do not want to rush you, but I need to know. What are you feeling?" Zelda took a shaky breath. "I am feeling like maybe my heart is not as broken as I thought." Like maybe you have been mending it all along, so gently I did not even notice until now. And what does your heart tell you? That I am falling in love with you, Zelda said, the words coming out in a rush. That somewhere between your patient kindness and your gentle hands I fell for you. I tried to protect myself, but you made it impossible. You showed me what real love looks like, Carter. Not words and empty promises, but actions and sacrifice and daily choosing to be kind. Carter's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Do you mean that? You love me? Yes, Zelda said, certain now. I love you. I think I have loved you for a while, but was too afraid to admit it. Carter kissed her again, this time with joy and relief flooding through the tenderness. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I want to be your husband in every way, he said quietly, but only when you are ready. Zelda's heart raced. I think I am ready. I am still a little afraid, but I do not want fear to control me anymore. I want to move forward to build a real marriage with you. Carter pulled back to look at her searchingly. Are you sure? There is no rush, Zelda. I meant what I said about waiting. I am sure, Zelda said, and realized she truly was. I want to be your wife completely. I want everything we can build together. Carter stood and held out his hand. Zelda took it, letting him draw her to her feet. He led her toward his bedroom, the larger of the two, and paused at the door. Last chance to change your mind, he said, though his voice was hopeful. In answer, Zelda rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring all her newfound feelings into it. Carter made a sound low in his throat and pulled her close, walking them backward into the room. That night, Carter showed Zelda what it meant to be loved with gentle hands and a patient heart. He took his time, worshiping her body with reverence, checking constantly to make sure she was comfortable, that she wanted to continue. It was nothing like the clumsy, selfish encounters she had endured with Thomas. This was intimate and beautiful, two people joining together in love and trust. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Carter pressed kisses to her hair and held her close. Are you all right? He asked softly. More than all right, Zelda said, marveling at how true it was. I feel whole for the first time in so long. You were always whole, Carter said. You just needed someone who could see it. Zelda turned in his arms to face him. Thank you for seeing me, for being patient while I found my way back to myself. There is nowhere else I would rather be than right here with you, Carter said, kissing her softly. You are my home, Zelda. More than this ranch, more than anything. You. Zelda felt tears slip down her face, but they were tears of joy this time. You are my home too. I did not think I would ever feel safe enough to say that, but I do. You are my home and my heart. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and when Zelda woke on Christmas morning, she found herself still cocooned in Carter's embrace. She lay quietly, listening to his steady breathing, marveling at the journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had been broken and desperate, fleeing from betrayal and shame. Now she was here in this rough territory, in the arms of a cowboy who had mended her heart with gentle hands and patient love. Merry Christmas, Carter murmured, his voice sleep-rough as his eyes opened. Merry Christmas, Zelda replied, kissing him softly. They spent the day in blissful isolation, cooking together, making love again with unhurried tenderness, talking about their dreams for the future. Carter spoke about expanding the ranch, maybe adding sheep or more horses. Zelda talked about wanting a garden next spring, maybe some fruit trees if the climate allowed it. And children, Carter asked carefully. Is that something you want? Zelda thought about it. A month ago, the question would have terrified her. But now, imagining children with Carter's kind eyes and steady nature, she found herself wanting it. Yes, she said. Someday, when the time is right, I would like children. Carter's face lit up with joy. I would like that too. A house full of little ones running around, learning to ride, helping with the ranch. Winter deepened, and Zelda moved her belongings into Carter's room, the second bedroom now empty and waiting for future children. The months passed in domestic happiness, with Carter working the ranch and Zelda managing the house, sewing, planning her spring garden. Samuel returned in March, greeting Zelda with gruff approval at how happy Carter looked. "About time someone put a smile on that face," he said. "Boy's been serious as a judge since I met him." Spring brought longer days and warmer weather. Zelda threw herself into creating a garden, and Carter helped her turn the soil and build raised beds. She planted vegetables and herbs, even convinced Carter to help her build a small greenhouse for starting seeds. In April, Zelda realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another month before saying anything, not wanting to get Carter's hopes up. But when June arrived with still no sign, she knew she was pregnant. Zelda waited for fear to hit her, for the terror of bringing a child into the world, but instead she felt only joy. She trusted Carter completely now, knew he would be a wonderful father, that together they could raise children in love and security. She told him one evening after supper, simply and directly, "Carter, I am going to have a baby." Carter's face went through a series of expressions, shock, joy, wonder, before he let out a whoop of delight and swept her into his arms, spinning her around. "Careful," Zelda laughed. "I am carrying precious cargo." Carter set her down gently, his hands immediately going to her still flat stomach. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Zelda asked, though his expression made the answer obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Carter said, his eyes bright with tears. "You have given me everything, Zelda. Love, a home, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." Zelda cupped his face in her hands. "I am the lucky one. You saved me, Carter. When I arrived here, I was broken and lost. You put me back together with your gentle hands and patient heart. You taught me that love does not have to hurt, that trust can be rebuilt, that happiness is possible even after everything falls apart." Carter kissed her deeply, his hands gentle on her waist. "We saved each other," he said against her lips. "I was lonely and adrift before you came. You gave me purpose beyond the ranch, a reason to come home at the end of each day." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and fall. Zelda bloomed with the baby, her face glowing with health and happiness. Carter was endlessly attentive, taking on more household tasks, making sure she rested enough, worrying constantly even though she felt wonderful. In late January of 1880, during another Dakota winter, Zelda went into labor. Mrs. Campbell came out from town to help, and after 12 hours of hard work, Zelda delivered a healthy baby boy. Carter cried when he held his son for the first time, this rough cowboy reduced to tears by the tiny bundle in his arms. "He is perfect," he kept saying. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Charles after Carter, with the middle name Edward after Zelda's father. Little Charlie proved to be a good baby, healthy and content, with his father's hazel eyes and his mother's delicate features. Watching Carter with their son made Zelda fall even deeper in love with her husband. He was a natural father, gentle and patient, waking in the night to walk a fussy baby, changing diapers without complaint, singing off key lullabies that somehow always worked. The months passed in the happy chaos of new parenthood. The ranch continued to grow and prosper under Carter's management, now with Samuel's help, and occasionally a few hired hands for big jobs. Zelda managed the household and garden while caring for Charlie, finding a rhythm that worked for their family. On their second wedding anniversary, Carter gave Zelda a locket with a tiny portrait of Charlie inside. "I wanted you to have something to show how far we have come," he said. "From strangers to partners to parents. Every step of the journey with you has been a gift." Zelda kissed him deeply. "I love you, Carter Preston, more than I ever thought possible. You took my broken heart and mended it with your gentle hands. You gave me a home, a family, a life full of love. I could not imagine being anywhere else or with anyone else. And I love you, Zelda Preston. You are my heart, my home, my everything." 2 years later, Zelda gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Clara. She had Carter's easy temperament and Zelda's green eyes, and Charlie adored his baby sister immediately. Life on the ranch was full and rich. Carter expanded the cattle operation and began breeding horses, building a reputation for quality stock. Zelda's garden flourished, and she began selling her produce and preserves in town, contributing to the family income. She also took in sewing work from ladies in lead, her skills as a seamstress providing extra money that went into a savings account for the children's future. In the evenings, after the children were asleep, Carter and Zelda would sit on the porch as they had in those early days, watching the sun set over the Black Hills. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, but always Carter held Zelda's hand, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her skin. "You ever think about Boston?" Carter asked one evening when Charlie was 4 and Clara was 2. "Ever wish you had stayed?" Zelda was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes I think about my mother, wish she could meet the children, but regret leaving. Never. That life was not mine, not really. This is where I belong with you, with our family." "No more broken heart?" Carter asked softly. Zelda turned to look at him, this man who had saved her in every way that mattered. "No more broken heart. You mended it completely with your gentle hands and patient love. I am whole, Carter, happy and whole." Carter pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Good. That is all I ever wanted for you." When Charlie was 6 and Clara was 4, Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she delivered twin boys, James and John, who kept the whole family on their toes with their energy and mischief. The ranch house was full of noise and laughter, children running in and out, tracking mud and bringing joy in equal measure. Carter proved to be an excellent father to all 4 children, firm but fair, teaching them about the land and animals, instilling in them the values of hard work and integrity. Zelda watched her husband with their children and felt her heart swell with love. This was the life she was meant to have, not the shallow existence she had almost settled for in Boston. Here, with Carter, she had found something real and lasting. Years passed in the rhythm of ranch life. The children grew, learning to ride and work alongside their father. Charlie showed a natural aptitude for handling cattle, while Clara had a gift with horses. The twins were still young but already showing their own distinct personalities, James serious and thoughtful, John impulsive and adventurous. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Carter took Zelda into Deadwood for a rare overnight trip, leaving the children with Samuel and his wife, who had moved onto the ranch the previous year to help with the growing operation. They stayed in the nicest hotel in Deadwood, and Carter took Zelda to dinner at a fancy restaurant. Over dessert, he reached across the table and took her hand. "10 years ago, I placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride, hoping for a partner to help run the ranch," he said. "I never imagined I would find you, that you would transform my life so completely. I arrived with a broken heart, certain I would never trust or love again," Zelda said, tears shining in her eyes. "You mended that heart with your gentle hands, showed me what real love looks like. You gave me everything, Carter, a home, children, a love deeper than I knew existed. We built this together," Carter said. "Every day, every choice, every moment. You are my partner in every sense of the word, Zelda. I could not have done any of this without you." That night, in the privacy of their hotel room, they made love with the passion and tenderness that had only deepened over the years. Afterward, lying in Carter's arms, Zelda thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had arrived in Lead, a damaged woman, fleeing from betrayal, certain she would never heal. But Carter had proven her wrong with his patience and kindness. He had given her time to heal, space to find herself again, and love that asked nothing in return. Now, 10 years later, she was whole and happy, surrounded by a family she adored, living a life richer than she had ever imagined possible. "What are you thinking about?" Carter murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "About how far we have come," Zelda said. "About how grateful I am for everything we have built together." "We have been blessed," Carter agreed. 4 beautiful, healthy children, a thriving ranch, and most importantly, we have each other. "Always," Zelda promised, turning to kiss him. "Always and forever." More years passed, bringing both joy and challenges. A harsh winter in 1891 nearly wiped out the cattle herd, but Carter's careful management and Zelda's frugal household kept them afloat until spring. A bout of influenza swept through the territory, but their family emerged unscathed thanks to Zelda's tireless nursing. Through it all, Carter and Zelda's love remained constant. They still stole moments alone when possible, still held hands on the porch in the evenings, still looked at each other with the same tenderness that had marked their early days. The children grew into young adults. Charlie went to agricultural college in Brookings, returning with new ideas for managing the ranch. Clara trained horses with a skill that attracted buyers from all over the territory. The twins, now teenagers, worked the ranch alongside their father, learning everything he could teach them. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Samuel and his wife, now almost like grandparents to the children, came with a roasted pig. Several families from neighboring ranches attended, along with friends from Lead. As the sun set and people danced to fiddle music in the yard, Carter pulled Zelda away from the crowd, leading her to their favorite spot on the porch. 20 years, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they looked out over the land. 20 years since you stepped off that stagecoach with a broken heart. 20 years since a cowboy with gentle hands started putting it back together, Zelda said, leaning back against his chest. "Best 20 years of my life, Carter." "Mine too," Carter said, pressing a kiss to her neck. "You know what I think about sometimes." "What?" "About how close we came to never meeting. If you had not answered my advertisement, if you had chosen a different man, if you had decided to stay in Boston after all. There were so many moments where this could have gone differently." Zelda turned in his arms to face him. "But it did not go differently. We found each other, Carter. Against all odds, across all that distance, 2 broken people found each other and built something beautiful." "Not broken," Carter corrected gently. "Wounded, maybe. Damaged, perhaps. But never broken. You were always strong, Zelda. You just needed someone to remind you." "And you reminded me," Zelda said, cupping his face. "Every single day, you reminded me that I was worthy of love, that happiness was possible, that my past did not define my future." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, the sounds of celebration continuing behind them. When they parted, both were smiling. "Come on," Zelda said, taking his hand. "Let's dance with our children before they realize how old their parents are getting." Carter laughed and let her lead him back to the party. They danced with each of their children in turn, then with each other, swaying to the music under the stars. Watching them, Charlie leaned close to Clara. "Think you will ever find what Mom and Dad have?" Clara smiled, watching her parents gaze at each other like no one else existed. "I hope so. They set a high standard." "They really do," Charlie agreed. The years continued to pass, bringing grandchildren as the children married and started families of their own. Carter's hair went gray, and Zelda's face showed the lines of a life well lived, but their love never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper, richer, seasoned by decades of partnership and devotion. They sold the ranch to Charlie when Carter turned 60, moving into a smaller house in Lead to be closer to medical care and town amenities. But they visited the ranch often, unable to stay away from the land that had been their home for so long. One evening, sitting on the porch of their townhouse, Zelda and Carter watched the sun set over the Black Hills as they had done thousands of times before. "You remember the first time we sat together like this?" Zelda asked, her hand in Carter's. "I do," Carter said. "You were so scared, so careful not to trust me. I was terrified I would say or do the wrong thing and send you running." "I never would have run," Zelda said. "Not from you. Even then, some part of me recognized that you were different, that you were safe. And now I know it for certain," Zelda said, squeezing his hand. "You saved my life, Carter Preston, not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with gentle hands and patient love. You mended my broken heart and gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams." Carter raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles as he had done so many times over the years. "You saved mine too. I was alone, focused only on work, forgetting to live. You taught me how to love, how to be part of a family, how to build something that mattered beyond land and cattle." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, their hands joined, their hearts intertwined. After 53 years of marriage, they had long since moved beyond needing words to communicate. Carter died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 81, with Zelda beside him holding his hand. At his funeral, held at the ranch he had built, 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren gathered to mourn the man who had been the center of their family. Zelda stood at his grave, dry-eyed and dignified, and spoke the words carved into his headstone. He mended what was broken with gentle hands. He loved without reservation. He built a legacy that will endure. She lived another 3 years, surrounded by family who visited often and made sure she was never lonely. She spent her days writing letters to her grandchildren, tending a small garden, and looking through photograph albums full of memories. On a warm September evening in 1934, 56 years almost to the day from when she first arrived in Lead, Zelda passed away in her sleep. Her last thoughts were of Carter, of that first moment when she stepped off the stagecoach with a broken heart and met the cowboy who would spend his life mending it with gentle hands. They buried her beside Carter on the ranch, under the aspens that turned gold every fall, overlooking the land they had built together. The headstone reads simply, "Zelda Preston. She arrived broken and lived whole. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, forever united with her beloved Carter." And there they rest still, the mail-order bride who came west with a shattered heart, and the cowboy who spent his life putting it back together. Their love story a testament to the healing power of patience, kindness, and gentle hands. Their descendants still run the ranch, now in its 5th generation. Each one taught the story of Carter and Zelda. How he placed an advertisement for a practical arrangement and found instead the love of his life. How she fled from betrayal and found healing in the arms of a patient cowboy. How 2 wounded souls found each other in the wild Dakota territory and built something that would last long beyond their years. The story of a broken heart mended not with grand gestures or flowery words, but with daily acts of kindness, with respect and patience, with gentle hands and an even gentler heart. A love story for the ages, played out in the Wild West, proving that sometimes the best love stories are not the passionate, tempestuous ones, but the quiet, steady ones that grow deeper with every passing day. And in the evening, when the wind blows through the aspens on the hill where they rest, the family swears they can hear echoes of laughter, the sound of two souls still together, still in love for all eternity.